Day one of the new year, so firstly, Happy New Year, friends. Here's to a happy, healthy, and prosperous year for you, your friends, and family, but also day one, and we've already got more information pointing towards a possible Season 2 major content drop. One that, if true, is a surprise to me, but one that I'd certainly be welcoming. A pleasant surprise more than anything. So today, we're going to be touching base on this new report that claims Season 2's content may be getting a little larger than initially anticipated. So as we go along, drop your thoughts below. Would you like to see this come to fruition? Not so much, but in the case, feel free to let me know down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, you'd like to subscribe to stay today with all things Modern Warfare 2 and anything COD related, I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, let's take a look at this newest report. So in a report published yesterday by Tom Henderson, industry insider whose track record does precede him, he stated Warzone 2 Resurgence map could come in Season 2. Now, we had heard about this rumored Resurgence map for a little while, dating back firstly to COD Next, where the director of communications, Stephanie Snowden, even said, "We've been listening to conversations in the community, specifically in small maps, and even recently, we saw a leak that proposed the actual TAC map and what appears to be a presentation of the image with the map itself." Now, piggybacking off that last point, having sat in on presentations, this is a very similar presentation of this TAC map to how we'd see things presented in the past. Just some sort of simple PowerPoint-esque quick points with a TAC map being the focal point and the other details just added in for conversation's sake almost. So we've known about these Resurgence maps that we'll see them coming one or more at some given point due to their wild popularity, especially in the tail end of the last year or so of the Warzone 1 era, but in Season 2, that's kind of a system shock perhaps to the traditional marketing and release approaches that we've seen in years past. So what else does this report propose? Tom's report stated details are scarce on when we could see Warzone 2's Resurgence map release, but fan theories and some behind the scenes comments have led Insider Gaming, his publication site, to believe the map could be released for Season 2. Insider Gaming has been told by two people that the Resurgence map will be coming at a part of Season 2, but due to our three source rule, we cannot yet say definitively if that is the case. So the report also conveys the fan theories that the castle point of interest is possibly the castle map that's been leaked from Season 2 key art and that's since subsequently been DMCA'd and removed, though re-uploads are indeed out there, very easy to find, so I'll link them down below if you guys want to take a look at that. But on that note, unless castle is just a reimagination or is being misunderstood as a remaster or reimagination of the World at War map and what we've seen recently in Vanguard, the leaked TAC map image from the Resurgence map doesn't seem to match quite as directly as one would think as that classic map, so it's just fan theory and conjecture at this point, though Tom did indeed mention and convey that part, and to take that point as a standalone theory. It's not necessarily tied to his independent report, but just for context there of that. But the key takeaway right now is that it is unconfirmed still. Even from an insider perspective, taking 3 corroborated reports to publish with certainty, Tom openly said that he only has 2 right now, so it's very possible, but be wary of it. Though, that said, in a sense, it does and doesn't make sense that we'd see this release in a Season 2 timeframe. So, kind of for the devil's advocate, the negative side here of this, I will say that in a traditional sense, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But only in that traditional sense, looking at years past. Activision loves to let things breathe, have its own time to stand alone, and so that players can experience something without it being overshadowed by another thing being either revealed or released. The one thing we've talked about here on a channel that is kind of a more so micro look at this, a little more hyper-focused, is that rule of 2 that we've talked about. And no, I'm not talking about the rule of 2 in which there are only 2 Sith attempting to rule the galaxy, but instead, the rule of 2 weeks at minimum that Activision likes to work with. Historically speaking, we have had this happen plenty of times, so that Call of Duty projects, releases, reveals, teases don't overshadow something else. Activision will always place at least a 2-week buffer between key dates and things happening. So for theory's sake, let's take a summer theoretical schedule that can rival prior years. Let's just say we have a seasonal launch that starts in June. That launch will have a week build-up period until that launch, the launch marking that middle point, and at the very least, a week of nothing to interfere with it or take the eyes off the marketing of that seasonal launch. 1 week before, 1 week after, 2 weeks total. Then let's just say we have a reveal of some kind shortly thereafter. At the very least, we'll end up seeing 1 week after that cooldown period after a launch for a week build up to start, again, middle point being that reveal, and then a week afterwards where nothing will end up interfering with that. And then at that point, you'll have a mid-season update already being promoted a week after that, the launch being roughly 1 month after that seasonal launch, and then a week again of cooldown. So that cycle continues. So while right now it's not necessarily as busy to require that rule of 2, the same principle does apply. If Activision can let something breathe and not pump any resources or funding into social pushes and have things overshadow something else, they're likely not going to. So on a more macro scale, that's why we got major Warzone updates in such larger intervals as we did by comparison. Verdansk launched in March of 2020. We didn't get another map until Rebirth in December of 2020. Then we didn't get another map, despite it being just an updated version of Verdansk, until the end of April 2021. Then in December of 2021, we got Caldera, a new large world map, another nearly 8 months after Verdansk 84 launched. After that, the final map that we got in the Warzone 1 era was Fortune's Keep, introduced, if you may have guessed it if you were following the trend here of these releases, 6 months after Caldera in June of 2020. Al Mazrah and Warzone 2, that launch being 5 months after that. So the pendulum seems to be on average swinging back and forth of a new map every 5 to 6 months between releases, which would normally bring that next launch we'd see after Al Mazrah being somewhere in that April to May timeframe, maybe even June. But this alleges differently and way sooner than we may anticipate, but it might not be wrong. So now that that sort of oddity here is described, here's why it makes sense. Warzone 2 is in an interesting spot. Let me clarify the following by saying these are objective observations from the community. I have zero stake in this. I've been chilling. I've been playing Warzone casually, not nearly as in-depth as I was in Warzone 1. I don't really care which way or the other it goes, but Warzone 2 has a tough choice right now because on one hand, it brings a new approach to Warzone, one that's slower, more tactical, and more in line with the sort of air-quote battle royale genre, the prerequisites known for that. Something pre-Warzone you'd expect from a battle royale, which is definitely for some people. But on the other hand, it deviated so much from the Warzone defining characteristics, like loadout drops, now also included after a month of them not being there, and at a higher price tag, slower looting, a different gulag system that relies more on the RNG of a teammate rather than your own solo gun skill, different looting mechanics, and so on. And that mixed in with the natural drop of players that you're bound to see when you have some sort of regression in content availability, you're going to see less players interested or playing at a current time. And for context, I mean content regression simply in the fact of a base build of Warzone 2 comparable to the first season that we had Warzone available in 2020. Just simply not as much to do and not as many ways to play the game as what we saw later on down the line in the final season of Vanguard or Cold War or even Modern Warfare 2019 for that matter. You take away a massive popular style of play and two maps that supported that in Resurgence, and you change mechanics in the gameplay loop greatly, and naturally you're going to have a drop off in comparable player count, which from again an objective perspective is entirely understandable, but from a shareholder and executive level, seeing those numbers taper off feels catastrophic, despite the launch again on something being a shift to an entirely new game, kind of being expected. Granted, Warzone 2 was a little different, and we saw smaller sample sets of Steam players and things like that showing 50% drop off in players after 2 weeks, but it definitely sounded some alarms. So how do you remedy that? Well, you introduce something sooner rather than later. The vocal minority will say it's more, but for theory and conservative guesstimation's sake, let's say Resurgence players made up about 25% of the player base. It very well could be more, very well could be less. We'll never know. But across modes like Plunder, the full solos, duos, trios, and quads offering on Caldera, in Vanguard, whatever Caldera LTM was active that week, versus then the limited runs of things like Rebirth and Fortune's Keep, only sometimes having things like trios or quads available, those singular modes towards the end, I think that 25% is a fair baseline for theoretical comparison. If you immediately cut off 25% of your player base, adding something in to accommodate that sooner rather than later when it's already an established game mode like Warzone, whereas in 2020 it was still picking up steam, players were just getting used to the overall Warzone experience. When it's already established and cuts out a huge portion of its gameplay experience, adding something in sooner to accommodate that as opposed to the previous 5 to 6 months we'd normally see something after is the smarter bet. So that comes down to the question now and rounds out the discussion here that I want to have is Season 2 a valid time frame to consider the launch of a Resurgence map? Based on the initial leak, it looks like it was already in presentation of the map of some kind, so meaning it's pitched internally somewhere and progress has already been made in development, so on that sense, sure, checks out. Plus the interest in adding more things to keep players sooner rather than later, I definitely think that it's entirely possible to see in Season 2, but I do have some slight objections with the idea that it will launch with Season 2. Instead, I kind of think this will be a Season 2 reloaded launch, and here's why. Season 2 already has a few wildcards that need addressed. More MP content, weapons, maps, modes, you name it. Maybe we'll finally see gunfight added in here on the multiplayer side of things, but another key pillar of the game is still missing. A ranked play, which we've already theorized will come at Season 2's launch, as a draw right in line with historically when we've seen other ranked plays launch, every single one since Black Ops 3, save for World War II's ranked play which launched in November. But every single ranked beyond that has launched in early February, which, incidentally, Season 2 launches, assuming nothing changes, on February 1st. so you wouldn't have to overshadow another pillar of the game being launched. So considering that, Season 2 Reloaded is my guess. Not to mention that's almost entirely perfectly in line with the 3-year anniversary of Warzone as a whole. Launching on March 10th of 2020, Season 2 Reloaded, if following that 4 to 5 week pattern that we've seen the last 3 years for initial launches of seasons, that'd take us to March 1st or March 8th. Easily doable and would be the draw for Season 2's mid-season update, allowing players to come back for that. So all that while still being at the minimum 1 month earlier than the prior window that we've seen for Warzone map releases. So that said, I think it's entirely possible we could see this new Resurgence map being released in Season 2, but for right now, it's a very interesting thought. So that's what we're gonna call it. I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback down below. What do you guys think here of this? Do you think we will see a Resurgence-based map for Warzone 2 in Season 2? Do you think it'll come at launch, mid-season, or maybe just not in Season 2 at all? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts below, but if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, and anything COD related. For now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care, and peace.